This video is about voter fraud, the impact mail-in ballots have on the voting process, and how to make sure your vote counts. I want my vote to count. I don't want my vote to disappear in the mail. I am voting in person. First off, the voting system as it exists before this election is flawed. I will show you the many problems our voting system has already experienced. The addition of mail-in voting will double or triple the potential problems and potential for fraud. Mail-in voting superseding voting at the polls is, in my opinion, unconstitutional. The secret ballot is not protected with the mail-in ballots. The ability of that vote to be counted is dependent on the Postal Service. The scale of this insanity is beyond comprehension. To make sure your vote counts, take your mail-in ballot to the polling location and vote there. Or take your mail-in ballot to the county registrar and hand submit it there. Those are the two safest ways to make sure your vote counts. Again, these are the two best options for making sure your vote counts. Take your mail-in ballot to the polling location, have them void it, and vote in the voting booth. Or take your mail-in ballot to the county registrar and hand submit it there. I am in California, and that's the best procedure for California. Now, every other state has their own rules and regulations and procedures, so go to the registrar and find out what your procedures are in your state, and then do the best you possibly can to vote in person and or hand deliver your mail-in ballot if you have one to your registrar, because they could just take it right down to the registrar and count it there. There's no issue with any kind of postal service getting it there on time or any kind of fraud. But I am going to identify the fraud that has existed in our system for a long time, and this mail-in ballot nonsense is exasperating our issues that we have with our voting system. I went to the internet and typed in voter fraud, and I got an excellent article from heavy.com, and they have a list of the states that have had issues with voter fraud, and I became aware that there's three categories. There are three types of voter issues: voter suppression, voter election law violations, and voter fraud. Voter suppression. Here's the law, Title 18, Section 594. Either legal or illegal, by way of laws, administrative rules, or tactics that prevents eligible voters from registering to vote or voting. Here are a couple examples of voter suppression. TV stations calling an election before the polls close. Alleged registrations being changed, causing voter problems. And types of registrations that are confusing voters, not allowing them to vote in the primaries. More voter suppression situations where the number of voting locations has been reduced, causing horrible lines at the polling locations, discouraging people from voting. I live in California, and this massive mail-in ballot situation, I believe, is unconstitutional. And it may very likely create voter suppression, where the number of voting locations have been reduced and may cause massive lines and discourage people from voting. Now, I don't know exactly what category this fits under, but a modern day problem is computer hacking, where someone's got into the database and changed the information on their registration cards, which creates incredible problems for the voters when they get to vote. Registration data tampering means lack of data security, and one of the most serious situations of changing votes is being created by algorithms that are put into the voting machines. One of the highest priority items that I feel should be addressed is the lack of security regarding vote shaving. And that's those electronic algorithms that actually shave votes. The second category of voter problems is the violation of voter election laws by states and counties. One situation is where a state charged a fee to vote, which was against the 1965 Voters' Rights Act. Absentee ballots are legal, of course, where you to actually request a ballot, but this massive mail-in ballot situation, I don't feel that's legal nor constitutional because it doesn't protect our right to secrecy. The third category is voter fraud. Voter fraud is a threat to the integrity of our elections, the heart of our democracy. Democrats are pushing proposals that will clearly make fraud more prevalent. Anyone who denies the existence of voter fraud in the U.S. needs to go to Heritage's online database, where they will find 1,285 proven instances of it, including 1,110 convictions. The Heritage Foundation has an election law reform initiative you might want to check out. Our voting process needs to be cleaned up. We've got cases of duplicate voting in 2 states, not updating one state's information after the person has left. Cases of illegally registering a place of non-residence, such as a parent's house. Absentee ballot fraud. Impersonation fraud at the polls, where someone comes in and votes for someone who's dead or has moved. False voter registrations. Vote buying, where people pay you to vote a certain way. Illegal assistance. People can help you fill out your ballot, but they cannot tell you how to vote. That's illegal. Voter intimidation. Ineligible voting by aliens. Altering of vote counts. Computer algorithms to steal votes. One of the main things that leads to voter fraud is the fact that states don't update their voter rolls. Judicial Watch sued several states who refused to update their voter rolls. Updating voter rolls is required in the motor voter law that was passed recently. California and other states don't require voter ID. Voter ID is needed to establish the registered voter as being the one who is asking to vote. Another big question is, does anyone take the time to verify the signature on when a person votes? I did some minimal research and I talked to people at the registrar's office, and it wasn't really clear to me how that process is implemented. Now that we've covered all the possible problems we have with voter fraud, voter suppression, now we're adding mail-in ballots. These mail-in ballots exacerbate the potential for fraud and abuse. Okay, here's your problem with mail-in ballots. Mail-in ballots get mailed to anyone on the voter rolls. What happens to that ballot if the voter is moved? What happens to that ballot if the person has died and no one has contacted the registrar's office about that person's death? What about inactive voters who get a ballot? Why have they been inactive for years? Are they educated about who the candidates are and what they stand for? These inactive voters are subject and vulnerable to vote harvesting and the illegal practice of paying for votes. Some of the problems that have arisen due to mail-in ballots, massive mail-in ballots, mailboxes have been stolen. Phony mailboxes have been created. Massive amounts of mail have been misdelivered. Mail has been lost. Mail truck trailers have been broken into. All contents taken. And mail carriers have had their vehicles broken into in broad daylight. I went over to the website realclearpolitics.com, and the articles under the heading voter fraud were these. Fake ballot boxes are just the start of this election's dirty tricks. Mail-in voting has a history of major disasters. New Project Veritas video. Voter fraud was actually caught on tape, and this is in the Representative Omar's district in Minnesota. People were actually being paid for their vote. And more article titles, such as Warning Signs in Pennsylvania of Mail Ballot Chaos in November. We are playing with fire with universal mail-in ballots. That was the Attorney General William Barr. Here's an interesting article. The Democrats explain their voter fraud plans. Another article, CNN's dishonesty on universal vote by mail. New Jersey's all-mail vote, M-A-I-L that is, vote debacle is a warning for November. And this is not the whole list. You can find these articles again at realclearpolitics.com. The articles under the heading Voter Fraud. Now, our U.S. Postal Service is good, but millions and millions and millions and millions of ballots coming in all at the same time? Mail-in voting is a mistake in this mass format. How do you guarantee your vote will be counted? You can vote in person. There are two ways to defeat voter fraud. One is vote in person, and the other one is to go right into the registrar's office and put your ballot in at that location. Now, it looks like every county handles the in-person voting differently, so go to your county registrar's office online or in person for specific details, and of course you can call them. To defeat voter fraud, take your mail-in ballot with you to the polling location. Have the clerk void your mail-in ballot and then vote in the voting booth. Again, our other choice is to go to the registrar's office in person, and you can go there in many cases early. Early mail-in ballots, yes, are approved because it will be counted in the same building. Again, the reason you vote in person is because you will totally avoid any problems that you will have with your mail-in ballot, and you won't be subject to voter fraud. One extremely important thing to do when you're finished voting is to go to your registrar's website and sign up for vote tracking. Even if you vote in person, you can check to see if the system got your vote. In California, you go to where'smyballot.sos.ca.gov and sign up for that. So how do we fix this massive voter problem? Well, two very important means is to demand updated voting rolls in your state and demand voter IDs be required. Updating voter rolls. Judicial Watch won a suit in Los Angeles where 1.6 million people could possibly be removed from their voting rolls. And there are pending lawsuits in California, Colorado, North Carolina, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. You know you have a problem when you have more voters registered than live in the state or that county. In one example, a state had only removed 10 people from their voting rolls in a whole year. Voter IDs need to become required. Everyone has a driver's license. They're required. And voting, in many cases, is much more important than driving a vehicle. Most activities in life require a photo ID. Why not voting? Voter IDs need to become required. One thing that is never asked, it's kind of a dicey question, but it's important. If you cannot do what it takes to get a voter ID, should you be taking on the serious task of voting? This is not an unreasonable question, but unfortunately it's hardly ever asked. Most people that have been dealing with voter fraud will agree. You need to create a clean, easy, but well-defined and regulated registration process so potential problems can be stopped at the start. Cleaning up the process means no massive mail-in ballot distribution, period. Protect the secret ballot. Don't create an unconstitutional process that is open to fraud and manipulation. Thanks for watching this rather lengthy analysis of the problems we have with our voting system. Let's get together and create a better process. The future of our country depends on this. Thanks again for watching.